Welcome to the Inside the Lab podcast, where we interview advisors, investors, sports tech founders, and sports business professionals and leaders to unpack their journeys and paths to success. Our purpose is to pull out the lessons and habits and thought patterns of these people and share those with others who can use them in their lives and incorporate them into their professional journeys. Our goal is to entertain, delight, and inspire our audience into action with real talk and practical advice. In addition, we'll also cover relevant topics in sports business specific to your industry. I'm really excited about the guests today. There's a lot of back history on this, but we'll get to that in a moment. But we're really excited to partner with TeamSportz for our next Community Series Roundtable event. Had the opportunity to interview CEO Francisco Baptista. Check out our interview on YouTube and on podcasts, anywhere, or Apple's podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts to see more information about TeamSportz. Today, Saturday, March 13th, coming from Los Angeles, California, we are featuring Cole Huff. Cole played basketball at the University of Nevada-Reno before transferring to Creighton University, where we first connected. After Cole graduated, he got the opportunity to play in the NBA G League for the Greensboro Swarm and played several seasons overseas. Cole is extremely passionate about writing, hence why he majored in journalism, and he's a sports journalist for 213 Hoops, and as well as Franchise Sports Media, where he'll be writing for the Las Vegas Aces. Cole, long time coming. What's up, man? How you feeling today? Happy Saturday.
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. It's long overdue. I feel like we should have done this by now, but that's probably on my end.
Man, all good. You were busy. You were getting to the bag, and we were we made it work. But no, really appreciate you making the time today. And jumping right into the questions, I talked a little bit briefly in the intro about your experience as a transfer student athlete. And I think it's an interesting time. Student athletes have a lot of options. Whether it's, going to the G League, whether it's the overtime league coming up, which we could talk about a little bit deeper. But for you, in your particular experience, why did you make the decision to transfer? And how do you feel as though that impacted your career long term?
Well, for one, I wanted to be a little bit closer to home. That was the initial thought of transferring. I mean, Nevada-Reno wasn't necessarily too far away, but I wanted to be back in California somewhere playing. But then when I put the word out, things got a little bit difficult, and one thing led to another, and a bunch of opportunities presented themselves that I never would have thought. Teams recruited me from the Midwest, from the East Coast, and kind of just opened my eyes once I had those recruiting visits and talked to those coaches on the phones. And, I was just open-minded about the whole situation. I ended up at Creighton, and I think it worked out for the best. We're doing this podcast here. Obviously, if I didn't go to Creighton, that wouldn't have happened. I got my degree. I was able to play basketball at a high level on national television most of the time. Met some great people. I think it just worked out for the best.
No doubt, man. And it's funny how everything aligns. I was a transfer student athlete as well from the University of Nebraska. And yeah, we linked up at Creighton, and we were able to connect and build upon that. So I'm glad that we were able to dive a little bit deeper into that. And, from your student athlete experience, you transferred, you're at Creighton. Did you know that you wanted to play professional ball right away, or tell me a little bit more about that thought process?
That was always my goal. I think it's most guys' goals, to keep playing beyond college. I always wanted to play in the NBA. That's what I was shooting for. I never really thought about going overseas. That never crept into my mind until, towards the end of college, it became more of a possibility. It became a little more realistic. But yeah, I think like with most of us, when we play sports our whole life, we always want to make it to the pinnacle, and we've done a pretty good job of getting close.
Right. No, I think the numbers, at least from the baseball, and I'm sure they're similar to basketball, like there's 350 high school baseball players, and then there's 5,000 Division I baseball players, and then out of those 5,000, I think maybe 20 of those play professionally, and then the top 5 play in the big leagues. So yeah, it's once you get to a certain level, there's certainly levels to it. There's a lot of talent out there.
Right.
And, talking a little bit about your professional journey as an athlete, what are some of the things that you learned about yourself in that time? I can only imagine between getting your body right, staying mentally in shape, the ups and downs with just competition, whether you win, whether you have success. Like, tell me a little bit more about that, and how have you been able to incorporate that into your professional journey as a writer today?
I learned a lot about my will and my work ethic. I
Mm.
think those are the two biggest things. They kind of go hand in hand. I never really realized it at the time, but throughout college, I think I had something like four surgeries, two or three on my knees, and then one on my finger.
Wow.
And but they all came after the season.
Okay.
So I would get hurt during the season. I would just, you know,
Write it
slug it
out.
out, just
Right.
ride it out. And it felt normal to me, just because I was kind of used to it. I'm like, hey, if I can play, I can play. I'm going to keep going. And, the guys appreciated me for that. But looking back on it, it's probably not the smartest thing. I probably made my knees a little bit worse or whatever I had going on with my body. But I always just wanted to be there for my team. And, it's kind of a guy thing too, just to, to be macho, be out there. Yeah, I can do this. But I learned that a lot about myself, that, I'm willing to go the extra limit to get the work done and provide for whoever I'm working for or playing for. So yeah, I learned a lot about myself during that time. And I think that that's something that most athletes can carry over to whatever profession they decide to do outside of their sport. Just having that will and that work ethic to just do what they got to do to get the job done.
No doubt. And while we're talking about, the transferable skills that you learned as a athlete in general, wanting to be there for your teammates, wanting to put your best foot forward, regardless of how you're feeling, and what your body may have been telling you, transitioning to your professional journey as a writer, is this something that you were like set in stone, like this was planned out, like, okay, I'm going to have this massive exit plan to go into a career in journalism? Or was this something that, at least for me, business development, it honestly fell in my lap? But Cole, from your perspective, tell me a little bit more about what that process was like.
It was never something that I planned to do. But at the same time, it's always been something that I have done. Like, I've been writing, dating back to, I guess, high school really is when I first started doing a lot of creative writing, taking classes. And, at Nevada, we went on our foreign basketball trip that team was going every year. And I had an opportunity to write like little newsletters back home for the fans and stuff while we were in Italy. So yeah, I got the ball rolling there. And then at Creighton, I had the opportunity to write for the Creightonian, which is the school newspaper for those that don't know. And I think that was the first time I really was like, this is pretty interesting. Just because I wasn't covering basketball, obviously, since I was playing it.
Sure.
I would cover the volleyball team. I went to a couple of your baseball games and sat in the press box.
Hopefully it wasn't too cold.
No, it was good over there at, what's the stadium called? At the
TD Ameritrade?
TD Ameritrade, yeah, where they have the World Series at.
Yep.
But yeah, that really opened my eyes right there to I wouldn't say the possibility of writing long term, because I still was pretty focused on basketball but and then once the pandemic hit and I came back from Turkey, where I was at last March, I was kind of just sitting around looking for things to do. Everything was pretty slow during the time, and I found the opportunity to write for the websites that you mentioned earlier, and my fiance pushed me to do that. She was like, "Yeah, I mean, you might as well. This is something that you really love doing. Might as well take a crack at it." And I'm glad she pushed me, because I want to pursue this field now. I'm glad that I'm in this sports journalism field, and I'm just excited to keep growing and see where it takes me.
No doubt, man. I'm excited to continue to follow your progress. I've read several of your pieces. I just encourage you to continue to do that, man. And if I can ever support you in any way possible, please don't hesitate to reach out. But Cole, you talked a little bit about your transition from an athlete being a professional, and early on as your professional in your journalism career, did you ever suffer from imposter syndrome? I know that as a student athlete, I felt like, I thought at one point in my life, I thought the greatest thing that I was going to do in the world was hit a baseball, right? And then you quickly realize that, that's not going to be it. And I found myself struggling to really put myself out there and put my best foot forward, because I didn't feel like I had the quote unquote makeup to do so. But in your experience, was that something that you really felt, or was it the latter?
Not really, just because, I was writing about basketball as soon as I got to these websites. And I feel like, if anything, I have the experience of being in the games, of being in the locker rooms,
Yeah,
of going through those wars, that I'm really confident that I knew what I was talking about in my writing. And I felt like, with my experiences and, you know, however many years, 20 plus years of playing basketball since I was a little kid, I could really bring the audience into a different way of thinking that another writer who maybe didn't play basketball. I was always confident in that way. I'm much better as a writer than as a speaker, but I think that's my advantage, and I'm fully aware of it. I know that there's obviously going to be the people that think that you get to where you get to just because of the jobs you've had, or the sports you've played, or whatever. But we're kind of used to that,
yeah,
being at universities and stuff. People are always thinking differently of us, so it is what it
sure.
is. But yeah, that's how I felt about the situation. That's kind of my thing going forward. I did this. I have experience with it, and I'm gonna show you guys.
No doubt. No, never leave a doubt in anybody's mind, man. Cole, I appreciate you sharing that insight. And, we're going to pivot the conversation a little bit and talk about leadership. And, we got an opportunity to play Creighton University, Big East, Power Five conference. You talk about coaches that have had experience coaching at, whether it's at different schools, administrators that have been at other schools, top level athletes across the board. Who are some of the best leaders that you've been around, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, this one, it took me a while to really get the people that I wanted to get, but I think that Jeff Grosel
Okay.
was a very underrated leader. Um,
Shout out to Jeff.
shout out Big Country, Big G. Um, yeah, during my junior year, which was my first year of playing after the red shirt,
Okay.
he was one of the few seniors on the team, and just the way that he managed the locker room, while also being a voice. Like, if we had concerns or whatever we had going on, he wasn't afraid to speak to the coach. Um, he was just really good at communication, which I appreciated, because that's not always the case with the older guys on the team, or with anyone on the team. Really, it's all about comfort. But he really embraced the role of, being that guy to do that. And I think we didn't make the NCAA tournament that year. We fell a little bit short. We went to NIT, but I think a big part of that success that we had on that team
Yeah.
was his leadership. So that was cool. I haven't told him that before. So if he ever checks out this podcast, then he's gonna be in for a surprise.
Man, we'll have to send them the link and tell them that we gave them a shout out.
Yeah.
But that's awesome, man. And transitioning from the experience at Creighton, and maybe a leader that you admire, or something that you've learned from a leader in your professional journey as a writer. Is there somebody that you, I don't want to say look up to, but you're like, hey, you know what? If I could mimic that individual's actions or perspective on how to approach their day to day, I'm going to have some success in the long run. Is there anybody that you look towards?
I like Chris Haynes.
Okay.
I don't know how much writing he still does. He's kind of in that realm of, he's made it kind of big now. He's does his Fox Sports shows. But he, similar to me, he played sports at Fresno State. So he was really good friends with a lot of athletes, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he's always interviewing Damian Lillard. And, he gets the scoop on a lot of things just because of the relationships he built
You're right.
just from being him. And, just seeing how he transitioned from player, college athlete, to, writing for free, doing freelance writing, and eventually, building up his resume enough and making the proper connections and networking that, he's where he's at today. That's someone that I kind of look up to and inspires me to keep going.
Mm. And you brought up an interesting point. I hope we can stay there for a little bit. But the relationship aspect of when you're doing these is it the correct term, editorials
Yeah.
or editorials on a team or a specific athlete. It starts with that relationship. And what are tell me a little bit more about that. Like, can you tell me about an experience where you maybe followed a guy, you built up a really good relationship, and you were able to ask him for, or I shouldn't say him, but an athlete for their time to write a piece on them? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that experience?
Uh, the biggest part of that has been in college. I think that's where I've really done that the most. I haven't had the opportunity to speak so much to the professional athletes, just given where I'm at in my career right now. But, obviously we were players once upon a time. So we're always going to feel a little bit more comfortable with the people that we know or the people that we are friends with.
Right.
So we might open up a little more. We might not be afraid to say things that aren't going to be taken the wrong way. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I'm following you.
it's always just about building a relationship. And I think that if you are genuine and, in your approach to the situation, then it's going to be an easy interview. You're going to get the most out of the person that you're speaking to. You're going to get the best quotes, and it's just all about, making that person feel comfortable. That's something that we're always going to continue to grow in as well. There's never a finished product, as writers, as interviewers, always trying to develop more to get the most out of the athlete. So
No doubt.
that's something I'm going to keep working on as well.
No doubt. No doubt. And, let's pivot the conversation a little bit. And, well, before we do that, one last question on your career thus far. What is one experience or event in your professional journey as a writer that has really pushed you to think differently or to approach your writing differently?
I wasn't a writer yet at the time, but it kind of all goes hand in hand. So I was in Turkey playing basketball last March when the pandemic hit, and I always ask myself, what would that experience be like if I were a writer at the time when the NBA shut down and all that stuff happened? It's like, which way do you go with your content? How do you get your content? Obviously we didn't know much about the coronavirus at the time. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word on here about that at the time.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like a really tough situation to navigate through with so much unknown. And I think that would have been a pretty cool challenge. And yesterday I was listening to a few podcasts. I guess It was 1 year anniversary of when that happened. I was listening to a bunch of writers share their experiences about the kind of panic that they had and stuff. It was just really interesting. So that would have been one. And then kind of in that same realm, I mentioned I was playing basketball at the time. So when I came back home, that was kind of a big, that made me think differently about my career as well. Just there was a lot of stuff on hold. The economic situation back overseas wasn't great. We didn't really know when we were going to be playing again.
Man.
So I had to start thinking big picture about, okay, so what if I don't get this job that I want? What if I don't play? What if I don't go back to the team that I was just on? And money is going to be lower. Let me think about some other things that I could do, just planting seeds for the future. And that's what got me into this writing stuff that I'm doing now. And I think I got ahead of the curve. I ultimately decided that I'd rather just pursue this and keep going than to play basketball. So that was a big event, March of 2020. None of us will forget that. But yeah, that time specifically made me think further about life, basketball, and all that stuff.
I think that's a great transition into our next segment of the show, where we talk a little bit about how to approach hard decisions. You touched on it, Cole, where March 2020 is a time frame that nobody will ever forget. Wherever you were at, the world stopped. And I remember, specifically speaking on my experience, I was at Dodger Stadium, and they were like, "Hey, everybody go home." And I'm like, "We mean go home?" I'm thinking we'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks, and we still haven't been. This is a year later, still the same situation. Things are looking up. But, I think that's, like I said, a situation that nobody will ever forget. But bringing it back to our next question, Cole, how do you approach hard decisions where you may not have complete information and context to hopefully paint a little bit better picture for the viewers? I had a professor one time, accounting professor, who said that life is like accounting. It's making decisions when you don't have complete information. And I was like, man, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm still trying to figure that quote out. But at any rate, Cole, for you, how do you make those tough decisions when you don't have, when it doesn't, there's no clear path of what it'll ultimately end with?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is not being afraid to ask questions. Seeking help, seeking advice from your support system first and foremost, and then also the people that may have been in these situations before. So
Yeah.
if you're having basketball related questions, if you're having journalism related questions, you're gonna reach out to your peers that are in those fields that maybe have more experience than you. That's the way I think. I'm not afraid to ask questions and get help, even though sometimes we think we can do everything on our own, and it's never a bad thing to to reach out.
Hey, no, nothing wrong with that at all. I'm gonna take that with me. I'm gonna continue to ask questions, man. Hopefully my colleagues don't think I'm annoying, but I'm curious. I'm just genuinely curious. How does it work? But rounding us out, Cole, I would love to hear some things that you do or that are a part of your day-to-day routine where you aren't really feeling motivated or inspired.
Yeah, so what I've learned, I had a big problem with this, especially with writing.
Mm,
You want to meet deadlines, you want to get things done by a certain time, and then you're having brain cramps, and you may be not doing your best writing. But what I've learned is just to take a step back. I mean,
okay.
if you don't have to finish something within the hour or whatever, take your time, go watch some TV, go play some video games, go hang out with people, whatever it is that you're going to do. Just you know take a break, and then what you'll find is that when you come back, you you might have gathered a thought just from watching TV, or an idea
No
might have
doubt.
popped in your mind when you were on Twitter or whatever it may be. But you don't always have to get everything done in a hurry, and that's something that I'm working on. I'm kind of a perfectionist. I like to, once I start writing, I want to finish right away, but that's not how you get your best product. So that's something I'm gonna keep taking with me. Hopefully, whoever's watching this or listening to this will take that with them as well.
Okay. Okay. I love it, man. We'll have to consolidate that and put that in the show notes. In the last few minutes, we got the lightning round where you're gonna answer these questions in as consolidated as possible. Nothing's gonna be off the wall. It's not gonna be anything major. But I'm throwing this out there. I heard it on.
I'm not gonna need my lifelines.
No, you're good. You're good. I think you'll be. I think you'll be all right. But first question of the lightning round is, how do you structure your writing?
Ooh, okay, it depends on what I'm writing. So if I'm writing like a game summary, I think throughout the game that I'm watching, I'm kind of just jotting down notes, but first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter,
Yeah.
and then kind of rounding that back into my writing when I'm done. If I'm doing a feature story, I don't know, whoever you're interviewing, obviously you're gonna have your questions for that person going into the interview, or planning your writing ahead. But then you're also gonna take quotes, and then you might get you might incorporate stats or background. So it really just depends on what you're writing.
Okay. Okay. Who is your favorite athlete and why?
Favorite athlete and why? Wow. I'm gonna go a little different here. So Chad Ochocinco,
Okay.
that's my favorite athlete. I'm a big Cincinnati Bengals fan. A lot of people always ask me, why are you a Bengals fan? You're from California. But when I was, I don't know, 9, 10 years old,
Uh-huh.
whenever Ocho was really Ocho,
Yeah.
he was just so exciting. And he kind of got the ball rolling for me with my Bengals fandom, and he's just a great personality. And he has a podcast now, I Am Athlete. That's just my guy. And
I'm gonna have to check it out because
yeah,
he is
that's my dude.
he I watched some clips of him, just the trash talking that he
Yeah,
had me
yeah.
rolling on the ground
It's
laughing.
hilarious.
I
It's
was
hilarious.
like, it's like I'm open, throw me the ball. But yeah,
Always open. Yeah.
big personality, big
Yep.
personality. Last question of the lightning round: what is your all-time favorite athletic experience? It doesn't have to be you playing in the game. It could just be you were playing or you were at the Avenue. What was it? And tell us a little bit more about that context.
I'm gonna give you two.
Okay.
So the first one was 2006, the Rose Bowl game, the championship game between USC and Texas. It was Vince Young against Reggie Bush and all those guys.
What, you were at that game?
I was at that game. Yeah.
For those who don't know, Cole is from Pasadena, California.
Yep. So I was at that game. One of my family friends works for the City of Roses or something involved with the Rose Bowl. I don't want to get it wrong. I sound terrible for that, but he ultimately had connections to get myself and my dad a ticket to the game.
Wow.
That's still, I think that's the best game that I've ever seen. Obviously, it's the best game I've ever been to. So that was crazy. I'll never forget that experience. And then as a player, my first game at Madison Square Garden, that was crazy too. Like I'm one of those guys who, like, I'm not gonna say I'm pessimistic, but I don't like the hype. So I'm always like, okay, Madison Square Garden, like, okay, yeah, it's just another game. But then once you get onto the court and all the lights now on you, it was a cool experience.
Man, that's awesome.
Wish we'd have won, but
man, I can't even imagine. No, that's super cool. That's super cool. Cole, where can the people find you on social media?
yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Cole Hoops. That's my name, COLE Hoops, like basketball, HOOPS. Instagram, I'm not on there much, but you can find me by that same handle at Cole Hoops. And yeah, that's what I got going.
Now we'll make sure to include that as well. But Cole, really glad that we were able to connect, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to join Inside the Lab, and I'm sure we'll talk really soon.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yep.